Yeah, my name is Dr. Michael Williams Sr. My Yup'ik name is Kokchak. It means big bear in Sami. There was a Sami guy that was born, died the day I was born. So I was named after a Sami reindeer herder that was stationed in Akiak that taught us to herd reindeer. Akiak, Alaska is along the Kuskokwim River in western Alaska. The our ocean is Bering Sea, and that's where a lot of people call it our bread basket, where all the people in western Alaska depend on Imahpik, the ocean there that produces fish, marine mammals, and other species that come up to our rivers for us to survive. Yeah, I was born in the small village at our house in Akiak, and I was delivered by a midwife who is my grandma, and she delivered all of the children in village of Akiak, and she was the only midwife that did a lot of deliveries in our community. It's a subsistence, hunting, fishing, gathering community where we all depend on the fish that the river provides for us, and also hunting moose, caribou, any mammals living in the land that we depend on to survive for our food, and we gather our berries and our greens and everything else that is edible in our lands to preserve them for our winter food. Well, it is population is about 400, and it has been fluctuating ever since between 300 and 400, and we basically were nomadic, going from spring camps to fall camps, summer camps, and not just residing in the community, but moving around to gather our food. And but in recent times, because of the schooling, the government providing schools and everything else, we decided to have our children go to government operated schools in Akiak, and that was the beginning of the changes from our traditional education to Western or oriented education. So our community have rapidly changed. Our language is still intact, but we are losing our languages very rapidly. But our hunting, fishing regulations are more severe due to, I think, the commercial interests that have impacted our resources for 100 years. So it's that way of life from regulating our own selves to state and federal regulations that are imposed from us from Juneau or from Washington, D.C. And that has created a lot of conflict with our traditional ways of life in Akiak, and having to adhere to these regulations that are imposed because of the commercial interests that are impacting our community. So Akiak has been there for thousands of years, of course, and we have had the gold miners coming in 100 years ago, and have changed the community in employing some of our community members working in a gold mine in Nyack. And of course, from the traditional ways of life, we decide to get into business with lumber, cutting our trees down and creating a lumber business to build our houses from our land. And also, that was when we started the sawmill and to make lumber.
Okay.
But the changes, building the churches, our religion was mainly our dependence on the cambio is something greater that we depended on, and all the rules and regulations and laws were created by our own people in Akazvik, where men were taught our traditional laws and our own regulations to live a good life where everybody works together to survive. And our decision making was much more everybody agreed with those decisions, and there were no dissent on our agreements. The women also had teachers in the community, but that all changed with the federal government coming in to wipe out our languages, to assimilate us into who we aren't, and it was very, and that is when I think things started to change with alcohol coming in, and processed foods coming in, and businesses coming in like gold mines and other grocery and commercial fisheries also began. But we haven't done any commercial fishing for the last 40 years now because of lack of salmon returns in our rivers, and so the commercial fishery on the river is no longer in play here. So we all depended on that cash income on the river, and but it has really changed with the dependence on government contracting and providing services, healthcare, education, environmental, and other services that we are providing today. So we have also revitalized our tribal government, and it was organized and recognized by the Department of Interior, Secretary of Interior, and he signed off on recognizing our tribal government in 1947. So I think that is from traditional form of government into federally recognized tribe. I think that really changed things that we have a government-to-government relationship with the federal government. Yes, growing up some 70 years ago, I'm getting up there in age, and 70 years ago, the climate was good. It was cold. We had snow. We had a decent amount of freeze-ups every year until about 20 years ago, and things started to change 20 years ago from normal winters with lots of snow, the cold freeze-ups. The river ice used to be like 7 feet, and when we measure the river ice, it's like about 7 feet. So in the last 20 years, it has deteriorated from down to 5 feet, 4 feet, 3 feet, and now it's about 2 feet. So inside 20 years, there has been rapid changes in the amount of snow that we have. At some years we had no snow, and lack of freezing, and the river in recent times, like right now, it's like over 24 inches, and it used to be again 7 feet thick, 6 to 7 feet thick, but this climate warming has affected our river, and also it has affected the oceans. Our oceans have warmed from the research that we've been able to do with Arctic rivers, and I was involved in the research that the oceans are warming, and it is affecting our salmon growth in the oceans, and we depend on the oceans because that's where all our salmon that have been spawned go back down to the Bering Sea to mill around for 4 to 7 years and to grow, and to before they start heading back to the spawning grounds where they spawned, and but they have decreased in size. The Chinook, the chums are depleting, and I think that is part of some of the things that occurred to the warming of the oceans and the river, and the Yukon River has had no fishing for the last 5 years. Zero fishing for salmon, because there are no salmon returning. And also Kuskokwim River, where I live, is extremely restricted, and we're getting the salmon we need, but we are not meeting our subsistence needs now in the last 10 years. So we're just the commercial fisheries on the peninsula, Alaska Peninsula, and also the pollock fishery trawling has had some effect on our returns of our salmon on the river. And the Norton Sound is experiencing decline of our salmon on all species, the chum, the chinook, the coho, the reds, and all of the salmon species in the Kuskokwim and the Yukon are in trouble due to trawling and climate change, and it just we're being affected by those commercial interests and also the impacts of climate change. So we have in Akiak we have had decline of permafrost for the last 20 years, especially in the last 10 years where we've noticed wheat bury or dead 6 feet under the ground, and some over 20 years ago we had a decent amount of permafrost when we dig for the graves, and but we've noticed the decline, the thinning of permafrost in our land, so in our ground, and that has created a lot of erosion on the Kuskokwim River, and where I was born, it has completely, it's been consumed by the river and with the erosion, because there are no longer permafrost to protect erosion. And when we don't have permafrost, we've did managed retreat, moving 8 houses and continuously moving structures to a new subdivision away from the river because of a rapid erosion, and that is what our community is experiencing, and the possible loss of our houses, homes have been affected. Those people that are living in vulnerable areas of erosion. So erosion is happening in the rivers and in the coastal areas, and one community of Newtalk had to completely relocate from their present site to Muxtawik. And there are other communities that are thinking about making the whole move, relocation to another community. So we're dealing with a lot of erosion and a need to relocate a lot of our villages and our structures, in some cases like Akiak, and we continue to work to see what the options are of saving our community.
Okay.
Yes, I think in fisheries management we have had traditional knowledge finally be in play in managing our rivers with traditional knowledge. But I think my spending 50 years with the elders about their stories, that the climate is going to change, and it's going to have a effect on our subsistence resource and our health in our communities. And I heard this 40 years ago when we had governing research of our communities, of trying to create traditional forms of government in our community, but they got into that the climate is going to be, the water is going to start warming, and it's going to affect the salmon, it's going to affect our land mammals, moose, caribou, the migration, and we're going to be seeing more extreme storms. And but I think our research with Arctic rivers and other research with the University of Colorado, and I'll share you with the websites on what we've been able to do in doing research on the temperatures of our rivers and our oceans, and I think that the traditional knowledge in the research have to be included in Western science. We made sure that if anyone is going to do research, it has to include and be approved by the tribal government, by the community. It has to be accepted, and we have to be included. And if it is going to help our community, we'll go ahead and do that research. And I think in education, we did research in education and also the fishery, and it has really helped with the researchers from the universities, and we made sure that our community is participating in that research and is credible, and that that research will help the community with data and with all of the information in our traditional ways of life and Western science as well. So both has to be utilized and benefit everyone in the end, the government, the Western science, and traditional knowledge with our people. So it's very important that we make sure that that those end results are benefiting everyone. Well, the on the issue of data that we have been compiling on the fishery on the river, along with the traditional knowledge, have really meshed in our management, our fishery in our community together. When the traditional knowledge is respected and used in the Western science together, making the final decision together, and it benefited the returns of our salmon, and also allowing us to continue to do fishing in our communities in Akiak and in the Kuskokwim River. And it's the only formal agreement that we have with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service that is in play after negotiations on how we are going to govern the fisheries on the Kuskokwim River. It is working, not like the state managed fishery, where there's no respect for traditional knowledge and indigenous knowledge, and so it's very important that we have those the traditional knowledge and the Western science with respect to each other to come out with good answers.
Change.
No, I think I think our traditional knowledge will help, and a lot of answers are there. If we have to go to litigation, because we are not the ones that are causing climate change. The oil industry, the other industries are impacting the climate, and we're not the ones that initiated climate change impacts in this rate. And but we are definitely available before all of that knowledge is lost. Our elders are going away fast, and they need to be tapped, and all that information need to be captured and recorded. And I think it's a little too late, but it's not too late yet to do that. So it's gonna have a lot of impact, and if we have no other choice, then litigation is the only way we can help stop the impacts on our climate change.
Okay.